Hi guys, and welcome to my review of the LG G Pad 2 10.1, and in many ways this tablet feels like it should have been released already 1 or 2 years ago, not just because of the slightly dated specs, but also because of a few other things. And despite all that, there are two things that I don't quite understand that I will talk about later in the conclusion. But for now, let's start with the detailed part. Okay, so let's start off with the detailed part, and this would be design and build quality. First of all, I have to apologize if there will be a slight issues with the autofocus, but this device does reflect light so oddly that my autofocus has some trouble. Let's try the size comparison here. As you can see, it is not as high as the iPad, but therefore wider, and of course it's also quite a bit thicker. But we have a different aspect ratio, so just keep that in mind. Okay. As for the device itself, on the back, as you can see here, we have this actual little odd material, because I can't quite surely say if it's real plastic or it's metal, because it feels like kind of something in between. I don't think it is metal, and as you can see here, the autofocus, if it is metal, then kudos for that. If it's plastic, even more so, because it feels a little bit like it from the texture and so on, but it's almost too smooth. And it doesn't get cold enough for metal, so I don't think it is. But if it's plastic, they did a really nice job, because it feels quite okay. It does bend the device, as you can see here, it does bend a little bit, but since it's a quite thick device and not made so super sturdy, I can get away past that. It does squeak only a little bit. As you can see, this is totally fine. It does bend quite a little, and it feels a little bit bendy, but it doesn't feel unsubstantial or anything like that, especially because of the weight, because it is about, at least on paper, 50 grams heavier than the iPad, but it feels a lot heavier. And also because of the wider design, the weight distribution is a lot harder to hold, because if you use it here, as you can see here, it doesn't even fit on the whole screen right now. In portrait, it feels way too long, and if you hold it in landscape, it feels quite hard to hold on to like this. That's the one thing that is the case with 16:10 tablets. Therefore, of course, the video experience for TV shows and video in general will be better. But as I said, the material here feels nice. It is also quite grippy. On the back we have the camera. Here we have the buttons. They feel really nice. They click really nice, are nicely positioned. Maybe I would wish for them to be on this one side, because I sometimes did mistake them, but it is fine. Here we have, and here the focus has trouble again, micro SD card slot and micro SIM, because this is also the LTE version. Here we also have a microphone. Here we have the headphone jack, micro USB. One of the two speakers, the second one is here, and on the bottom there's nothing. So overall, it's maybe not the lightest one. In terms of compact size, it's still okay. As you can see, the bezels definitely aren't super small. I think they are okay, because you will need definitely something to hold on to in both directions, so it's not that bad. It's just a little bit on the heavier and thicker side, but other than that, build quality is actually totally fine. So let's get to the display. Here we have a 10.1 inch 1080p display. Yes, maybe not the highest resolution anymore, but it's totally sharp enough. It maybe doesn't seem like it here on the video, but believe me, it's absolutely fine, no problems at all. Sharpness was very nice. The white point was also very good, no real complaints here. Maybe if it's slightly on the warmer side, but I think it's absolutely fine. And the blacks. Now, this is the one thing where I have an issue, and you can't see it because of the harsh lighting here, but I had quite some light bleed here and in all corners, which isn't something that I usually see these days on tablets anymore. It could also be a little bit deeper, but it's the light bleed that I have an issue with. Otherwise, colors are quite nice, nicely saturated, maybe not super vibrant or super vivid, but really nicely calibrated, really nicely balanced. Covers are nice. The brightness, the maximum brightness, isn't the very best one, because I had to use it at 75% all the time. Indoors, it's absolutely fine, 100% will be more than enough, but outdoors, I'm not quite so sure, especially because, as you can see here, it's super reflective. No anti-reflective screen or anything, so this could be an issue. Otherwise, viewing angles, absolutely fine. And as always, they don't look like it here on the video. So the display is a really nice one, but these days with QHD screens and Super AMOLED already on this size, it just can't compete. It doesn't do really much wrong besides the slightly weaker black, but it could have been better. Now, what about the sound? Let's check that. Okay, we have stereo speakers, but the issue is they are on the side, and especially while playing games, this is exactly where I held my hand onto, and it was very hard to get used to a different position, so I did block it, I did muffle the sound quite a lot. Otherwise, the sound is a little bit on the weaker side. The bass was quite weak, the mids were weak, highs were totally fine, but the maximum volume was something that I wished often to be a lot louder, especially for a tablet that is really nicely made for media. I just wished for more. We could actually try this just real quick so you, for example, see this on a video of mine. I would have wished for it to be a bit louder after all. Okay, so I guess this would be it, my review of the Nexus 5X, and I want to get one thing out of the way. Yeah, as you can see, it's okay, it gets the job done, but it's definitely maybe just about average. I would have wished for more, definitely. So, what about the performance? We are using the Snapdragon 800, which is quite a dated SoC by these days, but it does the job really nicely because last year didn't happen much in 2015. As you can see here, this is still absolutely smooth. No problems here, loading times were fine. Browsing experience was absolutely on par with the even best ones these days. Now, what about Phoenix? As you can see here, also really smooth. It's not maybe super smooth, but totally fine, absolutely fine, no problems here at all. And if we go into Palabra here, the same. Absolutely nice. Not really any lags, a little bit more lags than, for example, on some of the 64GB chips. But the smoothness is pretty much on par, as you can see here. Absolutely nice. Okay, there's no content here right now, but as you can see here, this is absolutely nice. Same goes for Google Plus. As you can see here, this is where we see a little bit more status because it has the 3 columns that just are way more intense. But even that, actually fine. And if you check the multitasking, absolutely okay. We only have 2GB of RAM, but it works out actually quite nice. So performance, absolutely nice. I think the 800, even though it's a dated one, okay, I would have wished for maybe the 801 or even more so the 805. But the 800, absolutely fine. No real complaints at all. It really performs nicely. So let's check the gaming performance. And if you've ever used one of these, you should know that it actually is really nice. And yes, you can see the reflections. This is really bad. As you can see here, yes, there are devices that are smoother, but considering this is a 2-year-old chip, I would say this is absolutely okay. Maybe not the highest frame rates for sure. So if you want something dedicated for more than just casual gaming, maybe try something else. But if you just want to play some mild games, maybe turn off the details a little bit and the experience will be absolutely fine. And I'm not quite sure why it looks so odd on the screen, but absolutely fine, no problems here at all. Of course, due to the higher screen and the not so high resolution, some games seem a little bit pixelated, but that's about it. Now, if we go into the battery life, this is something where I have a little bit of an issue because the first thing that I always talk about is the charging time. And here I'm not quite sure what to say because a full charge needs about 5.5, sometimes even 6 hours. And that is odd. I can't give you any more detailed issues, values because it just didn't work out. The original power, the charger was broken and I had to use mine, but I was disappointed by such a hard loading time. Now, if we check here the battery life, almost 2 days, 8 hours of screen on time, 8 hours over the course of pretty much also 2 days. Here, close to 8, but that is okay with some heavier use, over 8 hours and almost 2 days once again. So you can see I used the brightness of 75%, easily got 8 hours every time, and I tend to drain my device a little bit faster, so I would say 8 to even 9 or maybe sometimes 10 hours could be possible. So the battery life is definitely fine. Of course, standby drain could be maybe a little bit better. It's not quite as good as, for example, with Marshmallow, and I'm not sure if we will get this. So let's just get into the software here to check that, because we are running 5.1.1 with the LG UI, and I made a dedicated video for the LG Spirit, which is a phone, but it's still pretty much in line with all what we get here, because the only difference that we have here is dual window, and even though as useful as it might be, it's quite limited, because as you can see, these are the only apps you can use with it. So if you use YouTube and the Chrome browser, you are fine, but if you want to use some more rare apps or not so common apps, yeah, then you are limited. But otherwise, the experience would have been fine because multitasking worked quite nice. We also have lock screen. We have the customizable quick settings. We have the customizable navbar with the buttons. All that, absolutely fine. I still like the LG UI. We also have the theme UI or the theme engine. Everything is there. You are covered with all. You get no gimmicks, but only useful options. So I like it, and you can check my dedicated video if you want to see a few more of these things. Now, software has been done. Detailed part has been done. Okay, so let's get to the recap, and I have to actually apologize because I made quite a huge mistake because I didn't do my research properly, but I will get to that later. But for right now, build and design. I gotta say they didn't do anything wrong, but they didn't do anything particularly amazing either because it feels a little bit bandy, a little bit not that premium, but ergonomics, button placement and all that has been done nice. In terms of compact feel, it's still good. It just could have felt a little bit more solid or maybe a little bit more premium, but it's fine. The display on a really good level, but just not amazing with Quad HD displays these days. It could have been a little bit brighter, and the blacks, especially because of the light bleed, could have been a bit better as well. Now the sound, I would say, is the weakest part because just not quite loud enough, not quite rich enough. Gets the job done on an average level, but just not more. That I would definitely wish for something better, especially since it's very suited due to 16:9 for media consumption. The performance though is absolutely on a really nice level. Smooth, consistent at all, didn't have any bog downs. It performed overall very consistent on almost a very high-end flagship level, and this with a quite dated SoC that is already 2 years old. So the SoC says nothing these days, because if you do it properly, even a Snapdragon 800 can perform very well all over the bench. So battery life, I'm not so happy with the charging times. With 5.5 hours, it's just a little bit too long, but therefore it makes up with quite a good battery life. I would say solid at least 8 hours over the course of 2 days, and maybe 8, 9, maybe even 10 hours if you reduce the brightness and so on are possible. I don't see this as an issue. Standby drain will kind of limit it to maybe a 2, maybe 3 day use, because it just doesn't have the standby drain to last any longer. So I would expect to charge it every 2 days. Now, the software, I still like it a lot. It's very capable, functional, maybe doesn't look so amazing. And if I said in the software part there is a theme engine, it actually isn't. I've checked it once again. I kind of had a mix up here with something else, so it doesn't have that. But still, the software has everything I would expect from it to get. No gimmicks, but just highly functional stuff. So great. So now let's get to the one part that I made a mistake, because I said there are 2 things wrong with this device, and these 2 things were it's either released 1 or 2 years too late, or it's just priced too high, which is still true in Germany, but not if you check, for example, Amazon.com, which I had to do first, but I did it right after in the edit part, and I noticed something. It's 450 euros here in Germany for the LTE version, which I still think is just priced too high, because paying that much of an premium for the LTE is too much. But checking Amazon.com, I noticed for 299 you can get this, which completely levels the ground and makes it way more appealing, because in my first take I actually said if this would cost something closer to 350, it would have been a much better deal. But now that I see it's actually 299, I gotta say it's actually a really good offering for this price, because it doesn't really make anything wrong. Everything was on a quite great, or let's say quite good level, not quite great. And for this price it will be hard to find something better, especially for media consumption with 16:10. Yes, I would still prefer something like the Galaxy Tab S2, just in overall, but if you watch more videos, then the 16:10 makes sense. The sound maybe isn't the best, that is the weakest part still, but for $300 then it makes a lot of sense. For 450, not so much, and this is why I actually had to redo this take, because my whole conclusion would have been wrong. 450 is too much for these specs. 300 is much more reasonable and actually quite good. And the slightly dated specs like the just Full HD display, just S800, doesn't really make much of an issue then, because the value now is on a good level, which it isn't here in Germany, but that's something we will have to deal with. But at least if you can order it on Amazon.com, things are fine as well, and there will be a link in the description as well. So I think that was it, my retake of the conclusion, but at least I corrected it. I noticed my mistake. Now you should know everything. If you have any questions or anything to say, leave that in the comments. If you like this review, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. And if you want to see more content like this in 2016, just make sure to subscribe. And that was okay. Until next time. Bye.